If you can hear the hum of this carrier wave, stay on this frequency. Don't touch the dial. My name is Elias, and this is Apocascript Radio, broadcasting on a boosted 50-watt signal from a basement in North Portland. It is currently 4:14 a.m. The date is January 9th. I'm talking into a desk mic powered by a deep cycle marine battery that has about 6 hours of life left if I keep the transmitter at this gain. Outside, the temperature is dropped to 4 degrees. That isn't the wind chill, that's the base air temp. The wind is pushing it down to 20 below. I can hear the house groaning. The wood is shrinking in the cold. The copper pipes in the walls have already started to go. I heard the first one snap an hour ago behind the kitchen sink. There is a sound I want you to listen for if you're still in a house with a furnace. It's a rhythmic clicking. If you hear that, it means your heating oil is gelling. The fuel gets thick like wax when it hits these temperatures, and your pump won't be able to pull it. If that happens, you have about 2 hours before the indoor air matches the outdoor air. The sky isn't dark. That's the detail no one tells you about. It's a bruised, glowing purple. The particulates in the upper atmosphere are catching what's left of the sun from the other side of the world, reflecting it back in a way that feels oily. I was a logistics coordinator for a grocery chain before the grid went dark. I spent my life looking at maps and heat signatures of supply chains. I know exactly how much bread is left on the shelves in a 30-mile radius. The answer is 0. There are no trucks coming. The interstate is a graveyard of jackknifed rigs and frozen diesel. We're starting to get fragments from the shortwave bands. I've been monitoring the ham frequencies for the last 3 hours, taking notes on what the few remaining operators are seeing. A trucker who went by the handle Big Red managed to get a signal out from a rest stop near the Dalles. He said the wind there is so strong it's actually pushing empty trailers off their landing gear. He reported seeing a line of state police vehicles completely buried in drifts, no lights on, no exhaust coming from the pipes. He's been idling his engine for 48 hours to stay warm, but his tanks are at an eighth. He sounded very tired. He said the silence between the gusts of wind is the loudest thing he's ever heard. A nurse from a small clinic in Gresham reached out through a relay. She said they are out of oxygen canisters. The roads are too thick with ice for the delivery vans to move. They've moved all the patients into a single hallway and are burning wooden waiting room chairs in a metal trash can just to keep the fingers of the elderly from turning black. She said the most difficult part isn't the cold, it's the lack of information. People keep coming to the doors asking if the event is over, and she has to tell them she doesn't know what over even looks like anymore. I heard from a farmer out in Hillsborough who has been trying to keep his livestock alive. He said the power grid failure happened so fast the automated waterers all froze solid within the hour. He's been out there with a blowtorch trying to melt the ice, but the wind keeps blowing the flame out. He told me he had to make a choice an hour ago about which animals to bring into the barn and which to leave out. He didn't sound like he was crying. He just sounded hollow. There was a report from a utility worker near the substation on 122nd. He said the transformers didn't just blow, they melted. The surge that hit the grid during the initial flash was so high that the internal components fused into solid blocks of copper and steel. There is no fixing it. It has to be rebuilt from scratch, and there are no parts. He's currently sitting in his service truck, watching the city go dark block by block as the backup batteries in the cell towers finally give up. I'm going to stay on the air as long as this battery holds. If the signal fades, try tuning 3 kilohertz up. I'm going to keep repeating these reports. We need to know where the edges of the world are. The crank is slower now. It's a heavy, grinding sound. Sarah had to stop. A man named Miller has taken over, but his rhythm is uneven. The radio is warm to the touch, which is the only heat in this room. My name is Elias. This is Apocascript Radio. We think it's day 7, but the sky hasn't changed. It's a flat, permanent dusk. We've started burning the Grange's records. Ledgers from the 1940s, tax documents, old photographs of summer festivals. It feels like we're erasing the past just to buy another 20 minutes of the present. The smoke is thick and smells like old paper and glue, but nobody is coughing. Our lungs are too cold to react. The reports are thinning out. The network is fraying. I heard a summary from a man named Isaac, who is a ham operator in a remote valley near the foothills. He said the wind is finally stopped, and the silence is even more terrifying than the gale. He can hear the ice on the power lines for miles, a constant crystalline tinkling like a million wind chimes. He reported that the local reservoir has frozen so deeply that the ice is pushing up against the dam walls with enough force to cause tremors. He said the deer have come out of the woods and are standing in the middle of the roads, just staring at nothing. They've stopped running from people. Everything is just waiting. There was a report from a woman named Naomi, who was a clerk at a small municipal airport. She said the hangars are groaning under the weight of the black ice that has formed from the atmospheric soot. She described the planes as looking like prehistoric insects trapped in amber. She's been living in the flight kitchen, eating frozen airline meals. Her human detail was that she's been using the emergency exit slides as insulation, wrapping herself in the heavy yellow rubber to keep her body heat from dissipating into the concrete floor. I received a fragmented message from a utility worker named Gabe. He's at a pumping station near the river. He said the river isn't just frozen on top, it's slush-locked all the way to the bottom in the shallow parts. The intake pipes are sucking in ice crystals that are shredding the internal impellers. He told the relay that the water system for the entire county is now a dead organ. He's going to stop transmitting because the vibration of the radio is making his teeth ache. A woman who identified herself as a former teacher in a suburb said the furniture phase is over in her neighborhood. People have moved on to burning the flooring. She saw a family through a window pulling up their oak floorboards with crowbars. They were wearing every piece of clothing they owned, looking like shapeless bundles of rags. She said she saw a child playing with a toy car on a patch of bare subfloor, seemingly oblivious to the fact that the house was being dismantled around him. There's a report from a man in a high-rise who has been watching the city through binoculars. He said the fires are gone. For the first few days, there were pillars of smoke everywhere. Now the sky is clear and dead. It means either people have run out of things to burn or they've moved underground. He said the city looks like a discarded circuit board, silver and cold. The engineer here, Miller, is struggling with the crank. His breath is coming in short, ragged gasps. I can see the frost on his eyelashes. We've stopped talking to each other to save the moisture in our throats. Every word feels like a physical cost. I want to tell you about the whiteout that happened an hour ago. It wasn't snow. It was just the air turning into a solid wall of frost. You couldn't see the trees 10 feet from the window. It felt like the world was being erased by an eraser. When it cleared, everything looked sharper, more jagged. If you are still out there and you are listening to this on a battery-powered set, turn it off after this update. Save it for tomorrow, if there is a tomorrow. Find a way to keep your core temperature up. If you have books, read them one last time, then use them for the fire. Knowledge is heavy, heat is light.
We're going to try to melt some more snow on the stove. The water we have left is a slurry of ice and dirt. If the signal cuts out, it's not because I've left. It's just the gear. The plastic is starting to crack on the microphone cable. Everything is returning to its base elements.
The clicking of the radio handle is the only thing that keeps us awake. Miller's rhythm is fading, so a young man named Caleb has stepped in. He's pushing the crank with his whole shoulder now, his face pressed against the cold metal of the radio casing. My name is Elias. This is Apocascript Radio. It is day 8, we think. The kitchen we're in is down to 5 degrees. We've burned the cabinets. We've burned the pantry shelves. We're currently breaking apart the heavy wooden kitchen island with a fire axe. The splinters are flying into the dark, but nobody flinches. We are past the point of being startled. The reports coming through the long wave are like whispers from a dying room. I heard a summary from a man named Jules, who is a dispatcher for a remote rail line in the Cascades. He said the mountain tunnels have become wind instruments. The pressure differential is forcing air through the shafts at such high speeds that the tunnels are screaming, a high, piercing whistle that doesn't stop. He reported that the steel tracks have not just snapped, but shattered. He found a section of rail that had turned into iron dust because the metal became so brittle it couldn't hold its own molecular weight. He said he's staying in the dispatch booth because it's the only place he's known for 30 years, and he doesn't want to die in the snow. There was a report from a woman named Aris, a utility surveyor. She managed to get a signal to a relay near the valley floor. She said the ice creep has reached the main fiber optic lines. The freezing soil is squeezing the conduits until the glass fibers inside are snapping like dry hair. She said the internet didn't just go down, it physically broke. Her human detail was that she's been carrying a dead cell phone in her inner pocket just to look at the black screen and see her own reflection to make sure she's still there. I received a fragmented message from a farmer named Silas. He's out near the state line. He said the wind has carved the snow into shapes that look like fins, 10 feet high and sharp enough to cut skin. He saw a flock of birds that had frozen mid-flight and fallen into a drift. He said they looked like black stones. He's been feeding his last bit of grain to a wood stove because there's no livestock left to eat it. A report from a nurse in a basement shelter said the shiver hush has set in. That's the term she used for the moment when people stop shivering because their bodies no longer have the glucose to power the muscles. She said the room is silent except for the sound of the wind outside. She's been going around with a small mirror, holding it up to people's mouths to see if the glass fogs. If it doesn't, she just moves to the next person. She didn't sound sad. She sounded like a machine performing a final inventory. There's word from a ham operator in a coastal lighthouse. He said the salt spray has turned the entire structure into a pillar of ice. The light is still spinning, the old clockwork mechanism is still holding on, but the glass is so frosted that no light gets out. He's watching the ocean freeze, not just the surface, but a thick, slushy layer that stretches as far as he can see. He said it looks like the world is being paved in gray wax. Here at the Grange, we've stopped looking out the windows. There's nothing to see but the whiteout. The air inside is getting thinner as the fire eats the oxygen, but we can't open a vent or we'll lose the heat. It's a trade-off. We breathe shallow. We talk slow. I want to tell you about the silence of the machinery. I can hear the clock on the wall ticking, even though the battery died days ago. It's just the metal gears contracting and clicking in the cold.
It's like the ghost of time is still trying to keep count. If you're listening and you have a candle, don't light it for light. Light it for the tiny circle of heat it provides. Put your hands around it. Feel the flame. Remind yourself that fire still exists in a world that wants to be ice. Caleb is slowing down. The radio light is dimming. I can feel the signal weakening, the carrier wave beginning to wobble. We are going to huddle closer to the stove now. We are going to wait for the next gray smudge that passes for morning. If you can hear this, you are the relay now. Repeat what you've heard to whoever is next to you. Keep the information moving, even if you can't move yourself.
The ice is starting to form on the inside of the window panes now. It's growing in these long, jagged feathers that look like bone. I've been watching a single candle flicker on the desk, and the flame is perfectly still because I've taped plastic over the vents to keep the heat in this one room. It feels like the world is shrinking. First it was the planet, then the country, then the city, and now it's just this 4x4 space around a radio rig. We just received a faint transmission from a woman named Sarah who is currently inside a municipal building in Beaverton. She's a dispatcher, or she was. She says the emergency lines went quiet about 2 hours ago, but not because people stopped calling. The switching stations finally froze over or lost their backup power. She told me that the last call she took was from a man who was just calling to describe the color of the sky. He wasn't asking for help, he just wanted someone else to confirm that it was actually happening. She said he sounded peaceful, which is the part that's keeping her awake. There's a report coming in from a ham operator in Vancouver, Washington. He says the bridge is completely impassable. It's not just the ice. There are cars abandoned in every lane, doors left wide open, engines long dead. He said it looks like a sculpture of a panic that happened at 30 miles per hour and then just stopped. He's watching people out on the river ice. They're trying to walk across the Columbia. I need you to listen to me. Do not try that. The ice isn't stable. The current underneath is still moving, and if you go through, the temperature of that water will shut your heart down in less than 60 seconds. Stay where you are. A guy who identified himself as a former lineman for the city sent a burst through a packet radio. He's out near the reservoirs. He says the water mains are starting to buckle under the pressure of the freezing ground. When the dirt freezes, it expands, and it's crushing the old cast-iron pipes like they're made of glass. If you still have water coming out of your taps, fill every bucket, every pot, and every bathtub you have right now. In a few hours, the pressure is going to drop to nothing, and it isn't coming back for a long time. I'm looking at the battery monitor. It's dipping faster than I expected. The cold is eating the chemistry inside the cells. Even though I have them wrapped in old wool blankets, the floor is so cold it's drawing the energy right out of them. I had a report from a man named Marcus, who was a security guard at a large distribution warehouse. He says the perimeter fences are holding, but there is no one inside the building but him. He's surrounded by thousands of pallets of canned soup and dry rice, but he has no way to cook any of it, and no way to get it out to the people. He said he spent his evening reading the labels on the cans by flashlight, just to feel like he was still part of a civilization that produced things. He's lonely. That's the human detail that gets you. It's not the hunger yet. It's the realization that you're the only one left in a room built for hundreds. The wind just kicked up again. I can hear the antenna mast on the roof humming. It's a low, vibrating sound, like a cello string being pulled too tight. If that mast snaps, I'll be off the air. If you lose me, don't panic. Just keep scanning. There are others out there.
We're like a string of lights on a Christmas tree where the bulbs are blowing out one by one, but as long as one is glowing, the circuit is trying to complete itself. I'm hearing accounts of the hospitals in the metro area. A janitor who stayed behind at St. Vincent's says the backup generators are being rationed. They've shut off the lights in the entire building except for the emergency room and the intensive care unit. He described the sound of the hallways as deathly. No machines beeping, no floor buffers, just the sound of wind whistling through the elevator shafts. He said the doctors are mostly sitting in the dark with the patients, holding hands, because there isn't much else they can do without power. I need to tell you about the roads. I've had 3 different reports in the last 20 minutes from people who tried to leave. The mountain passes are gone. Not just blocked, but gone. The snow is 10 feet deep in some of the cuts. If you think you can drive your way out of this, you're wrong. Your tires will flat spot in the cold. Your seals will brittle and leak, and you will become one of those sculptures on the bridge. Stay inside. Burn the furniture if you have to. Start with the chairs. Save the heavy tables for last.
Yes, ma'am, we'll be clear, and 233 will be clear on the end for E. Edward, and so we both be at 50.
The signal is starting to drift. I can feel the frequency sliding, and I'm having to ride the fine-tune knob every few minutes just to keep my own voice centered. If I sound like I'm underwater, that's just the atmosphere thickening. The air is getting heavy with frost, not the light, fluffy kind, but a frozen mist that hangs in the air and stings your lungs when you breathe. They call it ice fog. It means the humidity is freezing instantly into tiny crystals. If you have to go outside, wrap a scarf around your face. 3 layers if you can. You don't want those crystals forming in your bronchial tubes. I've spent the last hour trying to piece together a map of the blackouts based on the reports coming in. It's not looking good. The Pacific Northwest grid has essentially decoupled from the national intertie. We are an island now. I just got a summary from a man named Thomas, a retired engineer who's been monitoring the long wave bands from a cellar in Tigard. He says the pop we heard across the radio spectrum earlier wasn't just interference. He believes the high-altitude bursts have permanently ionized a layer of the sky. It's creating a mirror effect for some signals, but completely absorbing others. He told me he's losing contact with every station east of the Rockies. One by one, the big relay towers in the Midwest are falling silent. Not because they're being hit, but because they've run out of fuel for their generators, and the technicians have gone home to be with their families. Then there was a report from a woman named Elena. She's a volunteer at a community center in North Portland, not far from where I'm sitting. She said a group of people showed up at her door an hour ago, carrying a man who had tried to siphon gas from a car using a plastic garden hose. The hose had shattered like glass in his hands because of the cold, and the gasoline, which stays liquid at temperatures where water turns to stone, gave him instant 3rd-degree frostburn on his hands. She said he wasn't even screaming, he was just staring at his fingers like they belonged to someone else. It's a reminder that the tools we used to rely on are changing their physical properties. Plastics are becoming brittle. Rubber is snapping. The world is becoming sharp. I'm also hearing from a city worker in the West Hills who is staying at a pump station. He said the silence is the worst part. He's used to the constant hum of the city, the white noise of the highway, the distant sound of planes. Now he says he can hear the trees snapping in the forest from half a mile away. The sap inside the trunks is freezing and expanding, causing the trees to literally explode like small pipe bombs. He said it sounds like a slow-motion gunfight is happening in the woods.
There's a report from a young guy, maybe 18 or 19, who stayed behind at a data center in the Pearl District. He's been watching the servers die as the cooling systems failed. He told me the heat from the machines was the only thing keeping the room warm, and as the last racks shut down, the temperature in the server room dropped 40 degrees in 10 minutes. He's sitting there in the dark now, surrounded by millions of dollars of dead silicon, eating a jar of peanut butter. He said the irony is that he can see his own breath in a room that used to be kept at a perfect 68 degrees by a multi-million-dollar HVAC system. I want to talk to you about the 3-day rule. In logistics, we always said that every city is exactly 3 days away from total collapse if the trucks stop moving. We are currently on day 4 of the transport freeze. The grocery stores are no longer stores. They are just cold, empty buildings. People are starting to realize that the just-in-time delivery system was a thin veil. I'm getting word from a small-town mayor out near Sandy. He's organized a warmth sweep. He has the local volunteers going door to door, checking on anyone who lives alone. He said they found an elderly couple who had been sitting in their living room under every blanket they owned, watching their own breath, waiting for the power to come back on, because they didn't want to leave their cat. The mayor said they had to convince them to move to the middle school gym, which is being heated by a single wood stove. That's the human detail. We are clinging to the things we love, even as the environment becomes hostile to life. I'm checking the voltage again. It's down to 11.8 volts. That's the danger zone for these lead-acid batteries. If I let it drop any lower, the plates will sulfate and I'll never be able to recharge them, even if I find a working generator. I have a decision to make soon. The sky out the basement window has shifted from that oily purple to a dull, flat gray. It's not morning, it's just a different kind of dark. The snow is drifting up against the glass, blocking out the last of the streetlights that haven't burned out yet. I think I'm going to have to move. This house is too big, too hard to heat. I've heard rumors of a group setting up a more permanent relay at a municipal bunker a few miles south. It has a diesel backup and a deep well pump that hasn't frozen yet. If I leave, I'll have to take the portable rig. It's a lower wattage, so the signal won't reach as far. You'll have to listen harder. You'll have to find the voice in the static. I'm going to pack the gear now. I'm going to wrap the transmitter in my parka and carry the batteries in a sled. If you're out there and you're listening, start thinking about your own phase 2. Don't wait for the walls to start frosting over. If you have a neighbor who is struggling, get them to a central location. 1 fire is better than 10 cold hearths.
I am back. If you can hear this, I have successfully relocated to the basement of the Municipal Waterworks building on the edge of the city. My name is Elias. This is Apocascript Radio. I am currently broadcasting on a much weaker signal, roughly 15 watts, powered by a small gasoline generator that we've scavenged from a construction site. We have about 4 gallons of fuel left, which we are rationing like liquid gold. The journey here was only 3 miles, but it took me 4 hours. The world outside is unrecognizable. It is a monochromatic landscape of white and gray. I saw cars on the freeway that were completely encased in ice, looking like translucent ghosts. I passed a grocery store where the front windows had been smashed, but no one was inside. People weren't looking for electronics or jewelry. They were looking for charcoal, lighters, and canned beans. I saw one man sitting on a curb staring at a frozen bag of oranges, as if he were trying to remember what the color orange meant. The atmosphere in this bunker is heavy. There are about 12 of us here. Utility workers, a few neighbors, and 2 city engineers. The walls are thick concrete, which helps keep the wind out, but the cold still seeps in through the floorboards. We've set up a perimeter of sleeping bags around the generator just to catch the residual heat from the exhaust manifold. I'm monitoring the emergency bands again. The reports are becoming more fragmented, more desperate. I heard from a woman named Clara, who is holed up in a high-rise apartment building downtown. She said the wind at that height is so fierce, it's actually bowing the glass in the floor-to-ceiling windows. She's been living in her walk-in closet because it's the only room without an exterior wall. She told me she can hear the building's steel frame popping and groaning as it contracts in the sub-zero temperatures. She's down to her last 2 gallons of water, and she's been melting snow on a camping stove, but she's worried about the fumes in such a small space. Her human detail was a small one. She's been wearing her wedding dress under her winter coat because it's the thickest layer of silk and lace she owns. A man who didn't give his name but sounded like he was in a vehicle reported from the edge of the industrial district. He said the fuel stations are completely dry. It's not just that the pumps aren't working without electricity. The underground tanks have developed vacuum locks because the air vents have frosted shut. He saw a group of people trying to use a hand pump to get gas out, but the metal handle snapped off in the cold. He said people are just leaving their cars where they sit and starting to walk toward the hills, hoping to find wood-burning stoves. There's a report from a local ham operator in Lake Oswego who says the silence there is absolute. No sirens, no engines, no dogs barking. He said he saw a deer frozen solid in the middle of a suburban street. It was standing upright, propped up by a snowdrift, looking like a statue. He said it was the most beautiful and terrifying thing he'd ever seen. It's a sign that the biological world is being outpaced by the speed of this freeze. I received a short, distorted burst from a dispatcher at the regional rail yard. He said the tracks have buckled. The steel rails, which are designed to handle heat expansion, weren't prepared for this kind of sudden, deep contraction. They're snapping like toothpicks. Any hope of getting relief supplies in by train is gone. He's currently sitting in the dispatch tower, watching the signal lights flicker out as the last of the battery arrays die. He told me he's just glad he's high up so he can see the horizon, even if there's nothing on it. A utility worker here at the waterworks told me that the pressure in the main lines has dropped to nearly zero. The city's gravity-fed system is failing because the air relief valves are frozen shut. Without those valves, the pipes are collapsing under the weight of the frozen earth above them. If you have any water left in your pipes, it is likely the last you will see for weeks. The generator just sputtered. I have to go check the oil level. In these temperatures, the oil gets as thick as molasses, and if the engine seizes, this station goes dark for good. If you are listening and you have a way to move, find a place with a chimney. Forget the modern comforts. Find a place that was built 100 years ago, before we relied on the grid for everything. Those are the only buildings that know how to survive a world without power.
The generator is holding for now. We had to thin the oil with a little bit of kerosene just to keep the internal parts moving. It smells like a garage in here. Heavy, metallic, and sharp. The air is so dry that every time I touch the radio dial, a spark jumps from my finger to the metal casing. It's a small reminder of how much static electricity is building up in this frozen atmosphere. My name is Elias. You're listening to Apocascript Radio. We are broadcasting from the West Side Waterworks bunker. It is now roughly 9:30 p.m., I think. It's hard to tell. The gray smudge of the day just bled into a darker shade of charcoal. The only way we know the time is by the watches that still have mechanical movements. The digital ones are starting to ghost out. The liquid crystal displays are freezing into black smears. I've spent the last hour huddled over the shortwave trying to find a signal from outside the valley.
It's mostly ghosts. The ionosphere is acting like a funhouse mirror. I picked up a station from what sounded like Calgary, but the voice was slowed down, warped by the atmospheric interference until it sounded like a growl. I did manage to catch a clear report from a man named Arthur, who is a retired park ranger up near Mount Hood. He's in a stone cabin with a massive hearth. He said the snow is now level with his second-story windows. He's been digging tunnels just to get to his woodpile. He reported that the sky up there isn't gray. It's a deep, terrifying red. He thinks it's the sun reflecting off the soot and debris from the strikes in the Midwest. He said the birds are gone. Not just flown south, but gone. He found dozens of them in his woodshed, huddled together in a mass, frozen into a single ball of feathers. Down here in the city, the reports are getting more localized. A woman named Maya used a hand-crank radio to get a message to a relay near Tigard. She's a teacher who has turned her basement into a neighborhood shelter. She has 14 people down there. She said they're taking turns sleeping to save on body heat. They've lined the walls with mattresses and books, anything to create an air gap between them and the freezing foundation. Her human detail was that they've started a story hour where they describe the best meals they've ever had in vivid detail. She said it keeps the children from crying, but it makes the adults feel like they're mourning a dead relative. We heard from a guy named Kevin, a mechanic who stayed in his shop in Milwaukee. He's been trying to get an old 1970s diesel truck started because it doesn't have an onboard computer that could be fried by the pulses. He said the metal of the engine block is so cold that when he touched it with a damp glove, his hand froze to the intake manifold instantly. He had to pour lukewarm coffee over his fingers just to get free. He says the rubber gaskets on everything, hoses, doors, windows, are simply disintegrating. If you try to open a car door that's been frozen shut, don't yank it. The handle will likely just come off in your hand. A report from a municipal worker at the sewage treatment plant was particularly grim. He said the lack of flow in the system, combined with the extreme temperatures, has caused the secondary digesters to freeze and crack. It's a systemic failure. The infrastructure of the city is physically breaking apart under the thermal stress. It isn't just that the lights are out. The skeleton of the city is snapping. I received a brief transmission from a person at the Portland International Airport. They aren't pilots, just someone who got stuck there when the ground stop was issued. They said the terminal is like an icebox. The massive glass walls are shivering in the wind. People have been breaking down the wooden check-in counters to build small fires on the concrete floors of the baggage claim. He said the runways are completely invisible under the drifts, and the big planes look like beached whales covered in frost. The most unsettling report came from a ham operator in Salem. He said he's seeing lights on the horizon to the east, not the glow of a city, but quick, silent flashes behind the clouds. He thinks it might be high-altitude electrical discharges caused by the dust in the air, or maybe more strikes further inland. He sounded very calm when he said he was going to turn his radio off and sit with his wife in the dark. He said there wasn't anything left to report that the silence couldn't say better. The engineers here at the waterworks are whispering. They're looking at the pressure gauges for the main reservoir. They're worried about a water hammer effect. If a major line snaps and the water moves too fast into a frozen section, the pressure wave could blow out the entire pumping station. If that happens, this basement will flood, and then that flood will freeze. We are preparing to move again. We have a heavy-duty van with a block heater that we've managed to keep lukewarm with a propane torch. We're going to head further south, toward the rural areas where people still have wood heat and independent wells. This city is becoming a trap. It's a beautiful, glittering tomb made of glass and steel. I'm going to try to keep this frequency open as long as I can while we load the gear. If you hear a long tone, that's just me testing the line. If you hear nothing, wait. I'll find a way back on.
The move was hard. We lost the van 4 miles outside of the city limits. The fuel line didn't just gel, it cracked. The rubber had become as brittle as a dry twig. We had to abandon the vehicle and hike the rest of the way to this location. We are now broadcasting from a Grange hall in a rural pocket of the Willamette Valley. My name is Elias. This is Apocascript Radio. I am using a portable field kit now. The signal is weak, maybe 8 watts. I am running it off a solar panel that I've leaned against a south-facing window, catching the dim gray light filtered through the haze. It's barely enough to keep the light on the dial glowing, so I'll have to be brief with each segment to save the charge. The journey on foot was a lesson in what happens when the machines stop. The highway was a long white scar. I saw a group of people huddling inside a stranded transit bus. They had used curtains to seal off the back half of the bus to keep the heat from their breath concentrated. They didn't even look up when we passed. They were just staring at the floor, saving their energy. The reports I'm getting now are coming from further afield, mostly through a chain of repeaters that are somehow still clinging to life. A man named Silas, a grain elevator operator in a small town to the south, sent a message through a low-power relay. He said the metal silos are groaning so loudly it sounds like a choir of dying giants. The grain inside is freezing into solid blocks, and the expansion is popping the rivets. He said a rivet shot out of a tank with enough force to embed itself in a wooden fence post 50 feet away. He's warned everyone in his town to stay away from the industrial site. His human detail was that he started wearing his old leather welding mask just to protect his face from the wind-driven ice crystals. I heard a summary of a report from a volunteer at a rural fire station. They've given up on fighting fires. Any water they try to pump freezes in the nozzle before it can hit the flames. He said they watched a barn burn to the ground 3 miles away and couldn't do a thing. They just stood in the snow and watched the glow. He said the most heartbreaking part was seeing the neighborhood dogs gathered near the fire, trying to get close enough to the heat without getting burned. There's word from a woman named June, who is a ham operator near the coast. She says the ocean looks different. The spray is freezing before it hits the sand, creating these strange, jagged glass sculptures all along the shoreline. She reported that the salt air is making the ice even more corrosive to the remaining power lines. She hasn't seen a ship on the horizon in 3 days. The horizon itself has disappeared into a wall of white fog. A report came in from a utility worker in a mountain pass. He's stationed at a microwave relay tower. He said the icing on the antennas is so thick that the steel supports are starting to bend under the weight. He's been climbing the ladder with a mallet, trying to knock the ice loose, but it forms back as fast as he can break it. He told the relay that he's the last person left at the station. Everyone else headed down the mountain 48 hours ago. He stayed because he didn't want the signal to die. I'm looking at the people in this Grange hall with me. There are about 20 of us now. We've moved all the tables to the center of the room and built a nest out of stage curtains and old flags. We have a small wood stove in the corner, but the wood is wet and it's producing more smoke than heat. Everyone's eyes are red and watering. I received a report from a person in a suburban neighborhood who is monitoring the local police bands. They said the police have stopped responding to anything that is not a direct threat to life. There are no more property calls. The dispatcher told a caller that if their house was being looted, they should just move to a room with a lock and wait, because the patrol car's engines won't turn over. A trucker who is stuck at a way station said he's been listening to the silence on the emergency channels. He said every once in a while he hears a key up, someone pressing the talk button on a radio, wanting to say something, but then they just let go without speaking. It's the sound of people realizing they don't have any answers to give. I'm worried about the solar charge.
The sun is sitting low, and the clouds are thickening again. It looks like another front is moving in. If the temperature drops another 10 degrees, the chemistry in these portable batteries will simply stop. If this is the last time you hear from me today, know that there are still people moving. We saw a convoy of 3 tractors pulling flatbed trailers yesterday. They were loaded with firewood and blankets, heading toward the local elementary school. There is a logic to the survival, moving away from the cities and towards the soil. Keep your radios tuned to the lower frequencies. The long waves travel further in this ionized air. Look for the gaps in the static.
The light in this hall is failing. It's that flat, dead gray that makes it hard to tell where the walls meet the ceiling. My name is Elias. This is Apocascript Radio. I am broadcasting on a 5-watt emergency handheld patched into a long wire antenna we strung between the Grange chimney and a frozen oak tree. If the audio is thin, it's because I'm trying to conserve every milliamp. The solar panel is covered in a layer of rime ice that I have to scrape every 20 minutes with a credit card. It's barely a trickle charge. We are living in a world of limited numbers now. How many matches are in the box? How many ounces of water are in the jug? How many minutes of signal I can give you before the screen on this radio flickers out? The reports coming through the chain are getting shorter. People are losing the energy for long sentences. I heard from a man named David, who is a pharmacist in a small valley town. He stayed in his shop, but not to sell medicine. He's been compounding basic salves because the commercial tubes of ointment have all frozen and split their seams. He said the biggest issue he's seeing is cold air lung. People are breathing so much sub-zero air that their lung tissues are becoming inflamed, making them cough until they burst small vessels. He told the relay that if you have to talk, do it through a thick cloth. Don't let the raw air hit your throat. His human detail was that he's been using his remaining distilled water to keep a single potted fern alive in his back office. He said it's the only green thing left in his world. There was a report from a woman named Sarah, a former city planner who was now in a refugee camp set up in a county fairground. She said the logistics have completely inverted. In the old world, we moved people to the food. Now they are trying to move the food to the people, but the moving part is broken. She described a scene where a pallet of frozen eggs arrived on a sled pulled by a plow horse. When they tried to crack the eggs, they were solid marbles of ice. They had to boil them whole just to get the shells off. She said people are becoming very quiet. There's no shouting, no anger, just a heavy rhythmic endurance. I received a summary from a ham operator near the interstate junction. He says the ice lock is total. He watched a state trooper try to use a road flare to melt the ice on a frozen door lock. The heat from the flare cracked the safety glass of the window instantly. The trooper just stood there as the wind rushed into his cabin. Then he walked away, leaving the keys in the ignition. The man said it was a sign of the moment where people stop trying to save their property and start trying to save their minutes. There's a report from a utility worker at a substation further south. He said the hum of the high-voltage lines has changed pitch. He thinks the physical weight of the ice on the wires is stretching the aluminum cores beyond their elastic limit. He's waiting for the big snap. He said when it happens, it won't just be a blackout. The tension will cause the utility poles to whip and shatter for miles in both directions. He's staying in a concrete bunker, waiting for the sky to go dark. A woman who didn't give her location, but sounded like she was in a basement, said the ground is screaming.
That's the word she used. It's the permafrost line digging deeper into the soil. As the moisture in the ground freezes 3, 4, 5 feet down, the earth expands and shifts. She said she can hear the foundation of her house popping like a slow-motion deck of cards being shuffled. I want to tell you about the silence again. It's not just the lack of cars, it's the lack of electronics. You don't realize how much noise a refrigerator or a computer makes until they are all gone. Now I can hear the heartbeat of the person sitting 3 feet away from me. I can hear the sound of the generator's metal cooling down when we shut it off. It's an intimate, terrifying kind of quiet. The people here at the Grange are starting to move the furniture into the small kitchen. It's the only room with a low ceiling, making it easier to trap the heat. We're going to abandon the main hall tonight. I'm looking at a map of the state. There are big circles drawn in red where the stations have gone silent. The circle is growing. Portland is a dead zone. Salem is flickering. The coastal repeaters are gone. We are a shrinking island of sound. If you're out there and you're cold, remember that your brain is your biggest heat suck. Keep your head covered. If you start to feel warm suddenly, if you feel like taking off your coat, that is the end stage. That is your body giving up its core. Don't trust the warmth. Trust the shivers. The shivers mean you're still fighting. I'm going to power down now to let the battery recover for an hour. I'll be back on the half hour.
I've moved the gear into the kitchen. We're huddled around the stove now, and the air is thick with the smell of scorched wood and old grease. The signal is going to be even more fragile from here. My name's Elias. This is Apocascript Radio. We're on day 5. The solar panel is useless now. The sky has thickened into a heavy, leaden blanket that doesn't let any light through. We've switched to a hand-cranked emergency radio that I've modified to push a signal out through the long wire. One of the guys here is cranking it while I talk. His name's Ben. I can hear his breathing over the hum of the internal gears. It's a rhythmic, mechanical sound that's become our heartbeat. The reports are coming in like echoes from a well. A man named Greg, who was a shipping clerk at a cold storage facility, sent a relay message. He said the irony is killing him. He's surrounded by millions of pounds of frozen beef and vegetables, but without power to the massive bay doors, they're trapped behind 3 inches of reinforced steel. He can't get the food out, and the people outside can't get in. He's been eating frozen peas he scraped off the floor. He said the facility is actually warmer than the outside air now because the insulation is so thick, but it feels like living inside a giant thermos. We heard from a woman named Martha, who was a volunteer at a library in a small town. She said they've started burning the books. They started with the outdated encyclopedias and the old magazines. She said there was a moment of hesitation when they reached the fiction section, but then the temperature in the reading room hit 10 below. She told the relay that the Grapes of Wrath burned for about 20 minutes and kept a group of 6 children warm enough to fall asleep. Her human detail was that she's keeping the poetry books for last. She wants the final fire to be something beautiful. There's a report from a utility worker out at a dam on the Clackamas River. He said the intake gates are freezing shut. The weight of the ice on the trash racks is starting to crush the steel gratings. If the water stops flowing through the turbines, the last flickering lights in the valley will go out forever. He's been out there with a steam hose trying to keep the mechanism clear, but the steam freezes into ice as soon as it touches the air. He said he feels like he's fighting a war against a ghost. I received a summary of a report from a trucker named Leo who was stuck in a mountain tunnel. He's not alone. There are about 50 cars in there with him. He said the tunnel has become a bizarre microclimate. It's staying just above freezing because of the Earth's natural temperature, but the air is getting thin because people are running their engines for heat.
He's been going from car to car telling people to turn their motors off before the carbon monoxide kills them. He said it's a choice between freezing or falling asleep and never waking up. He's trying to organize a blanket rotation instead. The grid is officially gone. I'm not seeing any more reports of flickering or surges. The silence on the high voltage bands is absolute. It means the wires are either down or the substations have tripped into a permanent lockout state. We are back to a 19th century world, but without the 19th century knowledge of how to live in it. I heard from a ham operator in the high desert over the mountains. He said the stars are the brightest he's ever seen. Without the city lights and with the atmosphere so thin and cold, he can see the nebulae with his naked eye. He said it's terrifying to see the universe so clearly when your own world is ending. He reported that the ground out there is cracking open, literally. The frost heaves are creating small canyons in the dirt roads. Here in the kitchen, we're down to our last few boxes of crackers. We found a jar of pickles in the back of a cupboard, and we're rationing the juice to keep our electrolytes up. Ben is still cranking. His arm is shaking, but he won't stop. He knows that if he stops, the voice stops. If you're out there and you have a hand crank radio, use it sparingly. Listen for 5 minutes at the top of every hour. Don't waste your energy searching the bands. We'll try to stay on this frequency as long as we have arms to turn the handle. There's a rumor of a convoy coming up from the south. Heavy tractors with snowplows and fuel tankers. They say they're moving at 3 miles an hour, clearing a path toward the population centers. I don't know if it's true. In a world this dark, rumors are the only thing that grow. But look for the lights. If you see a yellow strobe on the horizon, that might be them. Hold on to the person next to you. If you're alone, hold on to the radio. I'm going to let Ben rest his arm now.
The cranking is slower now. Ben is swapped out with a woman named Sarah, and I can hear the plastic housing of the radio clicking with every rotation. The friction is the only thing keeping the internal gears from seizing up. My name is Elias. This is Apocascript Radio. It's the middle of the night, day 6. We've stopped looking at the calendar. We just look at the frost on the door. We had to seal the kitchen door with duct tape and old rags because the draft was coming in so hard it was blowing out the candles. The air in here is getting thick. It's the smell of too many people in a small space, the smell of damp wool, and the metallic tang of the radio. We're breathing each other's air now just to stay warm. The reports coming through the relay are starting to sound like ghost stories. A man named Victor, who was a technician at a municipal airport, sent a shortwave burst. He said the fuel in the big jetliners has finally reached its freezing point. The wings are sagging under the weight of the slush inside the tanks. He watched a hangar collapse under the weight of the snow. It didn't make a sound when it fell because the snow muffled the impact. He said he saw a group of people living inside a flight simulator because it was the only room in the building with thick enough insulation to hold a bit of body heat. His human detail was that they were flying to Hawaii on a loop just to see the digital ocean on the screens. I heard a summary from a nurse named Hannah in a rural clinic. She's out of insulin. She's out of antibiotics. She said she's been using honey from a local farm to dress wounds because it doesn't freeze as fast as the medical creams. She reported that the local sheriff had to put down his own horses because they couldn't get to the hay in the barn through the drifts, and the animals were screaming in the wind. She said the sound of the silence that followed was worse than the screaming. There's word from a guy named Ray, a utility worker who's been living in a maintenance shed near a cell tower. He said the tower is singing. The ice has formed into long, flute-like shapes on the crossbeams, and the wind is playing them. He said it sounds like 1,000 voices humming a single low note. He's been using a car battery to keep his radio alive, but the battery is bulging from the cold.
He told the relay he's going to stop transmitting soon because he needs to use the last of the power to run a small heating element to thaw his boots. A report came in from a woman named Chloe who is in a suburban neighborhood. She said people have started moving into block colonies. Instead of everyone staying in their own cold houses, they've picked the one house on the street with a wood fireplace. They've stripped the wood siding off the other houses to use as fuel. She said it's a strange sight. The neighborhood is being eaten from the outside in to keep the inside warm. She saw a man crying as he threw his own dining room chairs into the fire. I received a brief transmission from a person near the coast. They said the fog is so thick you can't see your own hand. It's a frozen fog that coats everything in a layer of white needles. They said they heard a ship's horn way out in the dark, but it sounded distorted, like it was miles underwater. No one knows if it's a rescue ship or just a ghost of the old world. The engineer here at the Grange says the ground is now frozen down to 4 feet. The pressure on the building's foundation is immense. We can hear the floorboards underneath us snapping. It sounds like someone is walking around in the basement, but we know the basement is empty. It's just the house struggling against the earth. I'm looking at Sarah's hands as she cranks. They are gray and blue at the tips. We're all losing the color in our skin. We're becoming part of the landscape, gray and white and silent. If you're listening to this and you've still got a signal, try to find a way to make a dead man switch. If you don't check in with a neighbor every 4 hours, they should come looking for you. Don't let yourself fall asleep alone. The cold makes you tired, and the tiredness feels like a warm blanket. It's a lie. It's the last lie your body tells you. We are going to try to hold this position for another 12 hours. If the wood runs out, we'll have to move again, but there's nowhere left to go that isn't white. We are at the end of the map. Listen for the crank. If the signal gets choppy, it means Sarah's arm is giving out. Just stay with us.